Welcome to the ADHD Mums podcast, a safe place for everyday Australian mums to discuss their struggles with ADHD, motherhood, and life. Hello and welcome to ADHD Mums. Today we have Jo Piasecki, who has been messaging me and approached me in, I think it was November last year. Welcome to you, Jo.
Thanks for having me. This is exciting. This is my first podcast.
It is, and I've had some ups and downs in my personal life with kids and changes, and my husband and I talked last night about how we were going to make this work, and I said I'm absolutely not going to reschedule Jo again because we've been 6 months in the waiting for this episode. Jo is a husband, father. He is a doer. He is an ex-submariner. He is 30-something years old. He's an unashamed suburban dad, and he's hell-bent on being the best version of all above. I feel like we might be talking to an emotionally evolved father. Is that the case, Jo? I think it is.
Oh, look, I try not to pump my tires up too much, but I think part of this whole thing has been a learning journey and it has made me more kind of self-aware. And I tripped and fell into your podcast 9+ months ago. And I just thought, I really enjoy listening to you and all the guests that you've got on. And I've got a question for you. Am I the first dad or male on the podcast?
You are. I'm actually really curious and excited to have how this goes. I do get a lot of males that approach to come on the episode from an expert point of view, but obviously this episode is going to be the must-know guide for partners of women with ADHD. So we need to have a male perspective on that. Obviously that there is different types of relationships and not everybody's in a heterosexual relationship. I think this is a partner's perspective. You happen to be a male. If there's a female out there that like to give their perspective, power to you, send me an email. We can do that too. Or if there's really anybody, parent, child, anyone who would like to give their perspective, not a problem. We accept everybody. So welcome to you, Jo. I'm really excited and I thought it took such initiative to come to me with that idea. I was actually drinking at an art class for a friend's birthday, and when I opened it, I read it out and there was like 10 women. They were like, oh, I'll get him in. Who is he? Where does he live? Is he on the Sunshine Coast? And I was like, it was pretty funny.
Oh, unfortunately, I'm not on the Sunshine Coast, hence the reason I'm wearing a puffer jacket for the listeners. I'm in dreary Melbourne. It's April and it's shocking weather. So back to puffer jackets, but here we go.
Okay, Jo, would you like to tell me a little bit about yourself and why you were here and why you reached out?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jane. Married, newly diagnosed wife with ADHD, 10-year-old boy, 12-year-old girl. Background, I was in the Navy for nearly 10 years, engineering, submarines. The last couple of years in major construction. Now I'm a civilian, and the reason I left the military was so I could spend more time with my family. The journey of how I got here is that my wife's a teacher and she teaches at a special needs school, and she did mainstream to start with, didn't really like it, and then she did some casual relief teaching at a special needs school, came home, loved it. Absolutely loved working with kids with special needs. And it evolved from there. She'd come home with all these stories and she'd be like, oh, this kid did that and this kid did this. And as I was listening and absorbing her stories and supporting her on this slightly different career trajectory, I started seeing a lot of synergies between the behaviors that she would talk about. And I'm like, actually, you do that? And it was, for me, I've not had a lot to do with children with disabilities or people with special needs in general. And she would just tell us, oh, this is happening. And then this happened and all this wild stuff happens. And side note, and I won't even go down that path, but teachers do not get paid enough. And
they do not.
My wife works so hard and she's such a battler. And then as I was thinking, I was like, you do some of these things? And then we started talking about it. And then one of our good friends who's got some very neurospicy children had a bit of a chat about it. And we got encouraged to go down the pathway of seeing about it because it was just, I did my own kind of learning as well. And it was like, yeah, wow, there's a lot there that kind of matches up. The erraticness, the lack of focus, our calendar is so full. She leaves a trail of destruction around the house. And I thought to myself, and I said to her, I'm absolutely no expert. I never claim to kind of try to stay in my lane where I can. But I was like, I kind of feel like there's a lot of signs here that look like ADHD. And she dismissed it and, nah, not me. And then we went and saw a GP and we started the whole process. And it did take a while. All in all, I think it was a fairly positive experience, if not just a long one. And it was like, as I learnt more about ADHD and autism, side note, she isn't diagnosed with autism, but I saw all these synergies and all these behaviors and all these patterns, and I got stuck reading, and I'm not really a reader, so I started listening to podcasts, and then that's where I came across you, Jane, and there seems to be quite a bit of support for mums and for women, but what I didn't see was support for husbands and spouses, because I was a bit like, what do I do with this? How do I be a better husband and a better man and understand this? And so I just started reading and learning, and I was reflecting on my behavior over the years. So here's the example that I reflected on and actually felt a lot of guilt about it, was that my wife really struggled through uni while she was studying to be a teacher. She would leave it to the last minute. She'd panic and she'd have to drink a whole bunch of red wine to get through all her assignments, and very classic last minute panic that comes with ADHD for her. And then as she got through uni, she finished and it was amazing. She got a job. And then to become a registered teacher in Victoria, when you finish university, you get a provisional teaching license. And to get a full teaching license, you have to do a portfolio, like a professional portfolio. And one day it blew out. It took ages. They got to the point where they wouldn't renew her provisional teaching license. And they said, if you do not do your portfolio and get your full certification as a teacher, then we're going to cancel your teaching license, meaning she wouldn't be able to teach anymore. And it was at that point where I said to her, and I must have had a bit of a shit day, because I came home, and again, this is a dick move as a husband. I said to her, look, why don't you sit your ass down, have a glass of wine, and just do what you need to do? I said, you're a professional, you've been to university, you're educated, you should be able to do this.
I think that's a
And
fair comment. So I wouldn't beat yourself up on that one, to be honest.
but I did. And as I learnt more about ADHD and the reason that she struggled through uni and the reason that this looming licensing issue came about, in hindsight, that was a real dick move for me, because that's not the way her brain functions. She's not able to do what I can do. Like for me, if I've got a deadline for something, I'll just clear the calendar, I'll sit down and I'll do it, because I'm dangerously neurotypical. I can do that, but she doesn't have that ability. And as I was reflecting on the learnings and the journey and what ADHD meant and how it applied in our relationship and in our landscape, I just felt really guilty, because that's not a fair comment to make to a neurospicy person, to act in a neurotypical way. And so that's where I was just reflecting on my behavior. And there was several other examples that was somewhat similar. It just made me think there's got to be room out there for people to learn how to support their neurospicy partners, because it's hard and it's
Yeah.
different.
But you know what, Joe? You were assuming when you made that comment that she had a neurotypical brain. And then you were also the one that kind of grabbed onto some of what she was saying and then let her know that possibly that might be something that she has, which has then led to her being diagnosed and possibly medicated. Is she taking medication?
Yeah, with the journey, she's still somewhat in denial, hasn't really told anyone, and hence the reason I'm going to try not to say her name. She has taken medication, and the indication that we got from the psychiatrist, whose side note was lovely, we had a really positive psychiatrist.
Great.
I've got a funny story to tell you about that one. The medicine and I forget which one it was, it's the dexamphetamine one.
The long-acting dexamphetamine, Vyvanse?
That's the one, yes. The psych said, if this is right for you, it'll have an immediate effect. And when I listened to different women on your podcast, and there was some really good results with almost overnight, this magical pill gave them clarity and the ability to think and function. And we haven't had that with this medication for her. And so the journey of medication has been a bit bumpy at the moment. Like we've tried different doses, and she's naturally a very anxious woman. So it's just made her even more anxious at times. And so we're still working through what the medication journey is going to look like, but we haven't had the magical sort of overnight clarity, which we were hoping for. And part of the reason why she's very much, oh no, yeah, when we came out of the diagnosis, and I'll go back to that story now, when we were going for the final kind of diagnosis, the final step, I lived down the peninsula at Melbourne, and we went to one practice where she'd been previously, but then of course psychs move around, and she didn't read the invite properly, and we went to the wrong place.
But just like they should have diagnosed her just on that.
So obviously, and I'm a very measured, calm driver. And so I'm like, no, we'll get in the car, we'll drive to the other point, which was 20 minutes away. So we were now 20 minutes late for this appointment. And she was completely flustered, just off her head, panicking. And like, oh my God, first of all, she was like, oh, it's definitely their fault. And then she looked at the text message and was like, oh, no, it's my fault. Didn't read the text, which is, again, very typical behavior. Got the directions wrong, went to the wrong suburb. And so when we were talking through with the psychiatrist, he came in, we finally came in, he was giggling. He's like, there you go, that's one of the things. And we looked through her school reports, did all that sort of stuff, all the behavior as a child, and it was all there. And he just goes, of course you've got ADHD. And then we walked out. And then as we were driving home, she goes, nah, I've dreamt it up. I've made it up. I'm like, no, but you did the questionnaire. She's like, oh yeah, but I just all made it up. And I was like, well, look, someone, and again, with me, I stay in my lane. Like the gentleman who was her psychiatrist is educated and practiced and has been doing this for a long time. He didn't make that up. And it was really funny how that whole thing happened. But then, yeah, she's still been in a denial phase because maybe the medication hasn't had the immediate clarity effect. I'm not sure. But there is a few of her friends, because she's obviously got a fairly good group of teacher friends with her. And our house is a bit of a party house. They always end up back here. And a couple of them have said to me, oh, she's so ADHD. And she hasn't even told them. So it seems like everybody knows. Well, those that in the know, they know. But she'd rather not. And then I look at her mother and I'm like, there's every chance that her mother is ADHD as well. Since learning about it, the whole debacle of going through that psychiatry and all that process, it's been interesting. And I think why I reached out to you to circle all the way back to your original question was I think there's still not a lot, but there's some support out there for women and mums. But there doesn't appear to be any support for women and partners and men who have someone else that's neurospicy in the house. I reflected on a couple of situations that happened where I was like, dick move, you're a dick Joe. And I thought, how can I help? There must be other men, women, spouses that have neurospicy in the house. And is there anything that I can value add to people's journeys? Because the better we are as spouses and partners and being able to work through that, the better the whole dynamic is. And at the end of the day, I love my wife to death and I want to support her. And the more I can do better, and the more I can learn, then the better the outcome for the whole family unit because everything flows down from there. It's like when it falls apart at the top, the kids fall apart and then the dog falls apart and then we've got a stupid lizard and he'll fall apart too.
Oh, totally. Did you listen to Sharon Collins? She had being in a relationship with a neurotypical person, I think it was, from the functional family at all. She lives with her husband, who's got some pretty out there stories with his ADHD and three ADHD sons. And she's now
Oh,
an
yes, I remember
ADHD
that.
coach.
So I do remember the lady who had all the kids and husband because we've got family friends. Some of my wife's friends have very neurospicy families. And I think not only that, hanging out with other neurospicy families has been really good for my kids because they haven't had a lot of exposure. At this point, we haven't gone down the path of any diagnosis. So let's pretend that my kids are neurotypical at the moment, but they have so many different experiences with other families and other kids who are neurospicy. And just the funniest thing, and I'll tell you this story. It's so inappropriate, but so funny. And I won't say any names, but one of my wife's best friends, who's a teacher at the school, her son has got all the acronyms. He's got it all. Dangerously neurospicy. We went on holiday with them,
Oh
and
no,
then
that's your first mistake, but okay, yes.
oh yeah, but it was a great holiday, great people. And then my son made a comment about the boy. There was something of an issue happening in a pool, and then my son goes, oh, it's okay. It's because he's got a disability. But he meant it in the nicest possible way. In fact, he
Oh
actually
no,
jumped.
that is really nice, but
Yeah,
just maybe landed
it was
wrong.
cringy. It was real cringy. And ever since then, and it basically my son jumped in with a life jacket, and the kid was fine. Like it was fine, but he grabbed a life jacket. So anyway, so now whenever we talk with these people, we make these really inappropriate jokes about needing a life jacket. It's very funny, but what I love about it is that my kids are getting exposure to neurodiverse kids and it's making them more accepting. And my 10-year-old, he's a kind soul. And at school, he's got one of the quote unquote problem children in his class, which I hate that label. But this kid is clearly neurodiverse and doesn't get the support he needs.
Yeah.
And so my son often helps him. And I love it.
Oh,
It's so nice. And this kid, my 10-year-old, he tries so hard at school all day, comes apart, falls apart, and he's a jerk. And he gives everything he's got at school, and then he gets home to the safe place and falls apart. And look, I get that. It's where are his people?
but maybe he's getting those qualities from you if he's watching you care and support somebody. And I'm sure your wife cares and supports you back. If you are in a caring and supportive home, that's what he thinks you do when people need help, which is beautiful modeling for an inclusive world. Just quickly back to a point that you said earlier before we get off topic is, you know, how you're saying about how there wasn't a lot of support for neurotypical people that are in relationships or have, I suppose, contact or neurospicy people in the home. I think it's a great point you've made because the other way to look at it would be that no two neurospicy people are the same, even people with the same acronyms. So, for example, I clearly have ADHD. I have a very hyperactive ADHD. No task is unturned in my house, and I'm a perfectionist. So I go off. I just go off all the time. and I'll go start projects, I'll spend money, I'm impulsive, I am all over the shop. And my husband, who I've diagnosed with ADHD, it's a self-diagnosed, it's not
In
an
your
actual
professional
formal.
opinion?
Trust me, I'm his wife, I'm telling you he does. And he has inattentive ADHD, and he's the complete opposite. And I've really thought about a lot of what you were saying with the tasks that are undone. And it's only been through listening to Sharon talk and listening to other women on this podcast who are my guests that I actually have enough compassion to get it from his perspective. For example, he's done 3 weekend courses, like in person. We've sacrificed a lot as a family for him to do those 3 courses. He's done the same course 3 times because he cannot do the written component. Now, the written component from the last time that he tried to do it is still not completed.
Yeah.
And he really needs to do this course and he cannot complete it. I don't think he'll ever complete it. And so when I, as a mother or a partner or whoever it is, takes multiple children with me to allow the other person to do a task, and you come back to find the task not complete, it would drive me wild, completely wild, until I had enough compassion to see it from his perspective. Because all I'm thinking is, how have you not completed that yet? That would be like, I wouldn't even go to the toilet. I wouldn't eat. All I would do is that task. But from his perspective, it's completely different. And I talked to him the other day and I said to him, when you sit on the couch with your phone and you've got lots to do, you look really relaxed. And he's, oh no, I'm not relaxed. I'm like losing my shit inside. But you don't see that. So it's interesting that education, definitely from your point of view as a neurotypical person, but also the compassion just worldwide, I think needs to happen.
Yeah, well, I was rehearsing one of your other questions, what I have learned, and I've always been pretty empathetic, but I think my empathy's jumped to a new level to cater with being not a dick husband, because I now have to think, okay, so the washing is scattered all throughout the house. It's great. It came in off the washing line, but it hasn't made it back into where it else, into people's cupboards and stuff. And she didn't do that on purpose. She just got distracted with another task. And creating that hyper focus so that a task can get done is pretty much impossible in our house, except when it's something that she really wants to do. For example, renovating a bathroom. She just started it one day and bought a bunch of grout coloring and all this sort of stuff. And she polished the slate. She had a crack. And I'm a pretty handy guy. And I just said, I'm not going to jump in. I'm going to let you do whatever the hell you need to do. The frustration for me was that it took over a month, so long. And one of my pet peeves is if I reflect on my engineering experience in a submarine, you couldn't just leave shit lying around. You had to put everything away. And especially when it comes to tools and things like that, shed's immaculate. I like order, and it really bothers me when all the tools and shit are left all around the house. And so the bathroom was out of action for weeks and weeks. It really bothered me, but I just thought, you know what? I'm just going to let it go. And I was cognizant not to just jump in and do it, because then it would have ruined her plan and she would have dropped it cold and never finished it.
He kind of like, yeah.
A bit empathetic, but carry it along. If you can create that hyper focus outside of stress, anxiety, and the pressure of your teacher's license not being renewed, that brings on the hyper focus, but it's a tough one.
When you do the division of tasks, and we won't get into how that works because that's a tough one. But when my husband and I do it, and we did it again recently, I was really careful to only give him the tasks that required a timeline. They were time sensitive, they had to occur because people will die. Pick up child, it has to happen. But a long-term task is not a good thing for him to have if I actually want it complete. So it's interesting when you do planning to try and work to people's strengths, because otherwise you're putting people in a position where it's going to be really tough for them to do that task. Do you agree? Like, how do you work out your tasks?
How do we divide the task? I think it's more what bothers her. And it was like, I hate this bathroom. I hate it. I'm just going to start doing it. She's not a handy person. She's gotten more handy over the years. I
That's
guess the
very
honest answer is,
impulsive.
yeah, very impulsive, but also like at times very inattentive. She'll start something and then drop it and then go to the next thing. I don't think I've answered your question very well. And I think the honest answer is I don't really know. We do it on a priority. Maybe it's the same where it's kid drop off, school, work. And it's an interesting speed hump in the family for us as I've just started my own business like 10 days ago. So I'm probably a little bit more stressed than I usually would. And so that adds, I guess, another layer of complexity into the decision-making process and how we allocate tasks. And I think a lot of the task sort of direction that I take is that I'll try not to go too long on this one, but for years and years when I was in the military, I lived on the opposite coast of Australia. So I lived in Western Australia on a submarine, and my wife lived with the two very little kids at the time, back with her in-laws down in Gippsland, regional Victoria. And for a couple of years there, we lived completely separate lives. And I've got a lot of guilt associated with that. And it is something I talk through in my own therapy, but it's a guilt that's not going to go away. It's a lot of my attentiveness around the house and task completion is because I'm like, all right, you were a shit husband for quite a few years, being away, living under the ocean. My wife was basically a single mother. And a lot of those kind of household and household balancing tasks that I'll do as much as I can because I don't ever want to have back in that position where she feels like she's a single mum again. Because I do see a lot of dads around that not hands-on. And I think for neurospicy people, balance is a good way to create support. Because if you've got a neurospicy person carrying all the load, it's a recipe for disaster. And it just means that the stress goes up, the anxiety goes up, and the sleep goes down, and all of those, it all has a ripple effect. I think for me, I've learnt, and maybe I've always been quite self-aware, but I'm cognizant of my place in the family organizational chart, if you will.
Mm.
Obviously, right near the bottom, but
I was going to say you're under
yeah,
pets because that's typical husbands
correct.
where they are.
Yep. Yeah, I've got a therapy dog. I'm underneath that guy as well. During the COVID lockdowns in Melbourne, yeah, the dog got very used to having us around, and my daughter was quite an anxious kid, so I never wanted a dog, but we got a dog because that's probably one of the single best things for kids with anxiety is pets. We got him certified as a therapy dog, and so now that guy goes to school every day with the wife, and he has his great life. Yeah, I'm definitely below that guy.
Oh, you are. But I think that makes sense because if you're jumping in, you probably don't have to do the planning. Because I'm super hyperactive and I'll jump in and do everything. And then I've got someone inattentive I'm trying to work with. We actually have to plan. But it's interesting where you've got to work to your strengths. And if you're jumping in and she's jumping in, then you can see how the week goes and you don't have to have a set plan. Moving on a bit, because I do want to ask this one, I don't want to forget it. What types of challenges do you think a partner having ADHD creates in a partnership? Obviously, we talked about the bathroom.
Yeah, this is the one I did actually make some notes for this because I try and reflect because then that means that I can be a better participant in the household. I guess there's two things, and there's one that's a bit superficial and one that's probably a lot deeper. And the superficial challenges we have around mess, chaos, noise, children, balance, life, all that kind of stuff. And the much deeper ones is the lack of ability to regulate. I really enjoyed listening to Caitlin on your last podcast about the mum guilt because that's a
Oh, she's
thing.
brilliant.
That
Yeah.
is such a thing. The deeper things are things like the panic and the anxiety and the self-doubt and the lack of ability to regulate. It means that if I want to have two or three beers and go out, and then I'll just have two or three beers. But for her, it's either 0 beers or 100. And it's till 6 in the morning. Whereas I'm like, oh, it's 10 o'clock. I had a few beers. I'm ready for bed. But with her, it's not. So I think the lack of ability to regulate is probably one of the more serious things that happens in our house because it often leads to a lot of anxiety and guilt the next day. And it's not like she's got a substance abuse problem at all. It's just that it's either 0 or 100. And that really has a flow on effect into the days around it, mental health in generally. And I guess it's quite a bit more serious, isn't it? Like when you think about what happens if you can't regulate the bathroom situation, I would have written a plan and I'm quite methodical and I would have done it to a timeline. Whereas with the wife, it's just blown out. But she's not willing to drop it because she's like, I've started it, but she can't make the time to do things. I'm like, oh, what about if today you went in there and just did a little bit of grass? Oh, yeah, no, just no. And it's got to be on her terms. And I think that comes
That's
down to
really
the regulation
similar
thing.
to my husband because I was like, why don't you just go out there and just check the pool heater? Because I've been asking you to do that for 6 months. He's like, yeah, no, not today. And I'm like, but
But when?
when?
And
But
don't you
when?
dare do it yourself.
Oh, no. And you can't nag. And so then I'm like, what's a system that would work for you that I could write things down? But then we create the system and he doesn't remember the system. And I'm like, okay, compassion and breathing.
Coping mechanisms for us is put it in the bloody calendar. If I've got something, like if I'm going to do something that's a bit disruptive to the routine, like I've got specific days where I do the pick up and the drop off and the going to school and gymnastics and all that sort of stuff. And if there's some sort of variation to that, I need to put it in the calendar weeks in advance and then let her know like, sporadically up to it. Because otherwise, if there's something that disrupts the routine of, oh, but you're supposed to pick up the kids on Wednesday afternoon. Oh, I can't. I've got to be in the city for a meeting. Chaos. And straight away, like the panic. Oh, shit. Oh, that means I've got to leave school. And one thing I'm also very cognizant of as someone who was an absent husband for a couple of years while I was in the military, I feel so much guilt about the career progression, the loss of super, and all the stuff that comes with being taking time off work as a mother. And so I'm very like, nope, you shouldn't have to take a day off. Maybe I go a little bit too far the other way, and I'll try and be like, no, I'll solve this problem, but then we end up butting heads on it. That's fine. I already messaged old mate and she's going to pick the kids up. I'm like, oh, but I've moved my things around and then it's general chaos.
One thing that my hubby and I did, I think it was last week, and I reckon it's awesome. It's called the mental game, and it's a deck of cards, and we went through it together. And what it is, it's about freeing up space in your mind. So it actually is about designating mental tasks, not physical tasks. This isn't about someone getting lumped with more stuff, right? So this is my hubby was like terrified when we sat down because I think he thought, oh my God, I'm going to have to get lots of jobs here. But actually, it's about mental space. So, for example, I have schedule. So it's my job to organize the schedule. And when there's changes and stuff, I have to let him know and I put it in the plan. But we were concerned if there was two of us trying to do schedule, we would then butt heads on the schedule. It's really interesting. I recommend everybody do, or at least look up the mental game because it frees up space because you sound so hands-on, like you're trying to get everywhere, which I so admire and respect. It's so lovely and refreshing to hear that from a husband. But if you know that she is in charge of dinners or something,
I dare not write the shopping list. I dare not.
exactly, because then I was finding I was mentally loaded with everything. And then he was mentally loaded with a lot too. But yet we had so much crossover. It was nice actually to get up this morning and be like, well, he's on weekday breakfasts. So I'm just going to go do the washing.
Yeah, I'm a bit of a repetitive person. The jobs that I'll do of an evening is I'll do the cleanup and then straight into the lunches and then get the kitchen back in order. And then that way the kids' bags are ready for school, the uniforms are out, it's all there. And that way that allows me to relax. And it also means that the next day, whoever's going to be dropping the kids off at school is ready to go. But I find it quite disruptive if she comes in and starts making lunches. I'm like, oh, no, no, but I'm here. Last night I wasn't home. I had a meeting in the city late. And so I was home. And then not everything happened. Not all the right jobs happened. And it's like, well, that's my job. Yeah. I don't know how you split that up, but it's an interesting sort
Yeah.
of tangent to go on, isn't it?
It's a hard one because then you don't want to de-skill somebody. So you've got somebody that can't pack bags because they've never done it before and they're like completely overwhelmed because you're stuck in your rigid task. It's a hard one. So what I wanted to know, because it's a funny one, and I've been pondering this since I got your first message on Instagram. I suppose I got questions around the why, because I asked you in one of my emails if you've done any training or courses or how you've just worked it out. And I suppose it's like the how and the why that you've been so proactive, whereas there's a lot of partners, not necessarily male or female, that have put heads in sand, can't, not able to help, don't have time, don't want to know, don't believe in ADHD. I suppose it's the how and the why that I'm really keen to know about.
I think for our family unit, for me in particular, I'm a massive lefty. I'm very big on inclusion, diversity, difference. That's what I do for a job as well. That's part of what I do. So I'm naturally empathetic and steer towards creating difference and social outcomes and all that sort of stuff. So I've got that kind of brain and I've been doing that for about 5 years since I left the military. I guess it gave me a bit of life experience with doing it. One of the initiatives that I did at work was we ended up partnering with a disability enterprise and we got some amazing outcomes. And I got a lot of joy in dealing with that organization. And so I think for me, disability is something that I'm quite comfortable with. And I think that there are partners out there that are not. And like you said, with if people bury their head in the sand, the real loser is everybody but them. Because if you're not acknowledging and you're not realizing that people are different, and if the terms neurodivergent, neurodiverse, neurospicy don't mean anything to you, then you probably need to do a bit of self-learning and a bit of self-growth. And as we started the journey with her going down this path of getting an ADHD diagnosis, it made me think, how do I fit into this picture? And to answer your question, I haven't done any training. I've just got some life experience. So we've been married for 11 years, together for 14. So we've been together for a long time. And so over the course of us being together, I've just gotten to know her and I guess I've adapted to those behaviors, but I've never really become self-aware and understanding of why the behaviors happened until we went down this path. And so I think for me, it was about, shit, she does have different needs. How do I take this and be better? And how do I support it through that? Yeah, I haven't done any training formally. I'm not even sure where to start with that. But I think I just wanted to go into things with an open mind. Really, at the end of the day, the thing I care about is being a good husband and being a good dad. And if that's what it takes, then I'm always open to learning. I'm a continuous learner.
Oh, absolutely. And it reminds me, a lot of people would have situations at work or friends, let's say friends have had a falling out and you hear both sides of it. And when you listen to it, you're like, I actually get both sides of this. and you're both good people, probably working towards the same outcome, but you've upset each other in the way that you've come across the same activity. Let's say you both want to have a good time at the barbecue. Someone's been tasked with bringing something and they've bought something different, and then someone's taken it badly. Like little things like that can trip us up. But I think for me, being diagnosed with ADHD has made me a better person. It's made me a better partner. It's made me a better mother. And I'm sure your experience will be the same, where you actually can take up someone's perspective and see it clearly that they are actually doing the best they can. And I think I spoke to someone recently and they were having trouble with their partner. And I said to them, do you think that they have a good heart? Do you think their heart's in the right place, but they're just fucking it up? And she actually said, yeah, I do. And I'm like, if the heart's in the right place, try to come at it differently and be a bit more flexible. I think flexibility is important in terms of if you come at it straight in and you've got someone who's neurospicy, they don't like being told what to do. And I don't want to make a generalization, but most ADHD people I know do not like being told.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's about coming at it with an open mind. I guess being a teacher, she has learned different ways of educating children. And if there's one thing that works, it'll work for some kids, but it won't work for all of them. So I think it's about tailoring the approach and really understanding why things happen, and asking why doesn't necessarily always help sometimes. I think I've probably learned a bit from the families around us that are neurospicy. And I think it's just, I agree with you. We got together, I was in my early 20s, but I think I've definitely matured over those years, going from like a mid 20-year-old and then just learning more about people and life experience and having children. Yeah, I'm 36 and I've been married for 11 years and I've got a 12 and a 10-year-old. So I started pretty young. And had we have gone down this path, say 10 years ago, I probably would have acted very differently. I was just less mature. And I think now was the right time for it all to happen. And it was the fact that she was working at a school and it became very prevalent when I just connected the dots when she was saying, oh, this person did that. And I revert back to the first part of the podcast where we were talking about me discovering it, and I didn't know anything about it.
If we were to list out to husbands or partners listening or anyone, maybe their mums with ADHD that want to tell their husbands, these are some good things you can do, or helpful or unhelpful, what would be some unhelpful or helpful things that you've done or that you think work or don't work?
Step one would be to do a bit of learning and a bit of self growth and to listen to people like you and all the wonderful women you've got on the podcast, because then you hear the other perspective, because we don't hear that. We don't hear the conversations that happen between women. And so I guess some active listening, some active learning. And then from there, I found reflection. Oh, how did I handle that situation? I'm not necessarily saying that using guilt is a good method to learn, but I reflected on that particular instance where I told her to sit her ass down and be a professional and write her thing. And I just went, yeah, okay, that was not great from me. How can I do better next time? And there's got to be other ways that we can share stories outside of just fucking it up ourselves.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think the compassion and perspective and understanding, especially if you're married to somebody, you would imagine, you would hope that most people love each other or they have at some point. So then their heart will be in the right place. And I think that for me is important in terms of it'd be easy to fly off the handle and say you're lazy because you still haven't done the fence and it's been 2 years. But then what result do you get? It's sometimes for me on a Friday night when it's been a big week, if I can sit down with some takeaway with my hubby and watch a movie, I think it's these moments that keep me going. And I reflect that if I didn't have a partner that I had a good relationship with, my life would be a lot more difficult and I have a lot less joy. So it drives me to be more patient and compassionate because I think it's better off for everybody. And flying off the handle actually makes me a loser in the situation because I then alienate the person that I actually need, because my biggest challenge in my life is my children and I need help. And sometimes it'd be easier for me to say things that are unhelpful, but I think then who will be the loser and what result will I get? So that stops me when I just want to fly off the handle.
Yeah, and then what happens is if you do fly off the handle, it then flows through the whole family group. The kids lose their mind, the general feel in the house changes, and it just, one offhanded comment when I've had a shit day really has such a big impact. And at that point where I'm feeling frustrated, I've gotten better at just saying, look, I'm not feeling great. I don't want her to say something dumb. And even just trying to acknowledge that, yes, there's probably things in this house or things that haven't happened or things that have happened that are bothering me, but sometimes it's best just to bite your tongue. I think just cop it. There's no, yes, our spouses are our safe place, but there's also the right time as well. So finding that time, and like one of the things that I don't do very well sometimes is I get very excited about things at work. Like I've just started my own business, and so I'll just be like, "Rah, rah, rah," and I'll just go on a tangent, and then I'll look down and she's doom scrolling because she can't focus. She can't handle that information at the time. And that's when I need to be like, okay, I can see you can't take it right now. I'm going to stop talking. Because that's what happens is the sensory overload for her is a big thing. And then that's when she hides back into swiping or scrolling. And years and years ago, I just thought, why? Like, why are you not looking at me when I'm talking to you? And it's funny, one of the other teachers, who's one of our close friends, she said something about there was a staff meeting and this was the moment for her when she just looked across and the wife was scrolling through her phone. She was still actively listening and participating in the meeting, but she just needed that little dopamine hit to do something. And that's when her friend was like, there it is. That's the spiciness. And she communicated that to me not long after that. And I went, oh, maybe there's something to this. Because if other people are seeing it, then maybe I can. It's funny, just
Mm.
like why do you need to bury yourself in your head? And sometimes that's when there's too much going on. She's too exhausted or there's too much going on in the busy brain. And I need to be able to read that situation better. And also, I think I can do okay at that, but the kids don't. She'll be curled up on her bed, leave me alone. And then they'll just come in and be like, Mom, Mom. And oh God, I laughed your story about Gus in the last episode about the glass of water. The same thing happens in our
Oh,
house is
really? Oh,
they'll be
kills me.
I can do like your mum is closing down because she's in overload. She's exhausted. She's got some big feelings. Like, what is it you need, mate? I'll take you here. I'll jump on the trampoline there, and nothing's ever good enough. And now I think, as part of accepting this whole thing, I've stopped taking offense to that as, oh, I lived on a submarine for years away, so my kids don't even know who I am. It's not that anymore. It's not me. It's just her. And there's nothing I can do about that situation. And I love that you summed it up really beautifully. You said it was, I just wanted to talk to you. And that's
Yeah,
kids want
yeah.
sometimes, whereas they can't. And the more that she pushes back, the more they push back. And then boom, we've got yelling and screaming in the house.
Yeah, I might recap that one just in case anyone hasn't listened. So basically, last episode with Caitlin, which was part of the I Hate Motherhood air quote title, I was talking about how you probably know this story better than I do, Joe, because I'm trying to scale back in my mind. Basically, my son Gus wanted water and he just kept asking and asking. And I can't remember. I was overloaded. I was done. I was cooked. I was doing something else. And then my husband jumped in very nicely and said, I'll make it for you, mate. And as he made it for him, Gus then refused to drink the water and then lost his mind and then ran off into his room. And then my husband he was pretty pissed off actually. And rightly so, because he's
I
jumped
get
in
it.
to help you. And then he's like, why won't you drink the water? And it turned out after a bit of coaxing that Gus was like, I just wanted to talk to you. Like he wanted to connect with me and he wanted me to pour the water and hand it to him and probably touch his head and say, are you okay, mate? And probably hug my leg briefly was look what he was looking for. And he didn't obviously get that and he flew off the handle.
At that point, about the water, it's not about the water. And that's where I've gotten to learn more about ADHD and those behaviors. It's not me being a bad dad because I got the glass of water or because I jumped in and helped. It's because they wanted to connect with mum. And mum at that point didn't have the ability to do that. And the kids don't see that. And that's one thing I've tried to get better at is that I get excited. I've got a lot going on. And I just go, oh, I'll just pour all this information to her. And then I look down and she's scrolling because
Yeah, because yeah, it's
it's
too
too
much.
much. It's just too much. And I
Yeah,
think if you can start to recognize those signs when there's too much going on as a husband, partner, spouse, then that's going to allow you to just read the environment. Because if you're not aware of the situation, you could take offense to that. I could say to her, "Oh, you don't even care. You're not even listening.
I
I'm.
think we've
This
all
is
said
a
that.
yeah, you don't even care. This is like just started a business. I'm nervous, I'm anxious, and I'm excited and I'm stressed, and I'm going to tell you all about it, all the world and all the people, and use all these strange construction acronyms, and you're not even listening. Fine, I'll go. And it's now I've learned that it's not me, it's not even her, it's just not the time. And I think patience and empathy tie nicely into that, and finding a way to acknowledge that it's no one's fault and not to blame anyone. I think that's important as well. And just going, you know what, I'll get you later because gets home from work, she's cooked. Kids everywhere, and the brain is going a billion miles an hour. It doesn't help because then if I jump in and add to that chaos and then add to the getting pissed offness that happens, the whole house just explodes.
Yeah,
Sometimes it's just being humble and taking a step back, right? Going, you know what? I really want to tell you this shit story, but I'm gonna have to wait.
yeah, it is that awareness. I so get that because my hubby will sometimes come home from work and I work from home. And when he comes home, I never know when he's going to come, right? Because he doesn't think he has ADHD. He clearly does. So he can't stick to a time. He just comes whenever, right? And he's usually excited to talk to me because we don't have anyone else in the house and we might get a conversation in. However, from my perspective, I'm like, I've only got an hour before I need to pick up. I've already set myself 50,000 things to do and I'm only 20,000 in.
Gotta
I'm
hurry
under
this up.
pressure. Yeah. And I'm just thinking in my mind, I do not have time. This is not what I want to do. But he's thinking, when else can we have a conversation? But I said to him, if you could let me know when you're coming and let me know, I will then make sure I have that in my mind that's going to happen. But if you walk
And
in and try to hijack my time, you're going to get some serious kickback with your
and
long
it's
story.
and I resonate with that as well because when the kids were little, I did finish at a very standard time, and it would be like, it's 4:31. Why is he not home? And I always took it as a not a micromanagement, but it was like for her, it was survival. It's like, all right, Joe's gonna be home at 4:30 and it's now 4:31. I think I'm dying. And it
Yeah,
goes straight to that full-blown panic. And in that situation with the husband, it could be helpful to explain that it's not about me knowing where you are or me following your time or checking in on you. It's about knowing when I need to find time for you
exactly.
because
Because you
you've got
drop
so
it.
much going on.
And it is, he just drops in with his long story, right? And then I'm like, oh, no,
I'm a
no, no,
classic for
no.
a long story.
Oh, yeah, you sound very similar. So then, yeah, I said to him, if you can just let me know, like just give me 30, 40 minutes notice. But if you arrive into my office and start telling me a long story, prepare for me to not want you to continue.
Yeah. And it's
Yeah,
hard when you're in that situation as long, boring storyteller. It's so important, but I've got to give you detail. And for the wife, it's I don't care for the detail. Give me the short version because I got shit to do.
I know I actually have to get something in my hand. I have to
Oh,
fidget because I'm like, God, I gotta hang on for dear life. And
I
then
have
sometimes
fidgets everywhere.
and then I have to
We
think
have
to myself, channel my patience for my children because it's a similar love. I love him so deeply and I want him to feel good and it is important to him. But I'm like, take the patience that you have for a long story and just channel that. I've got a 5 or 6 minute, it's difficult for me to sit still. But I said to him, I'm happy to give you 20 minutes, 30 minutes if you just tell me when you're coming. So it's that compromise like, how can we get our needs met, but in a way that suits both parties? And that's difficult.
Yeah, agree. And I think the key to that is finding time to communicate. And if what suits your household is a text message saying inbound, 15 away, that if that helps to set the agenda, then great. Or if it's during the day, sometimes my wife and I will just text, oh, I'm just here today, I'm just doing this. That means at the end of the day, I don't have to tell you a really long, shit, boring story. That sometimes helps for us as well. And sometimes we just have to go, you know what? I actually need to do something else for the family. I can see that my 10-year-old's having a meltdown. He needs some rough time on the trampoline, and that's more important than my shit story. Because he's a sensory kid and he's a 10-year-old boy and he tries his best and he's so sweet and he works so hard at school. When he gets home, train wreck. So quite often we will go and throw each other around on the trampoline and he's getting bigger and stronger, which is bizarre. Now I'm not scared of breaking him. So yeah, all the Maggie Dent stuff says that boys need touch and rough and rumble. And I know that. And when it doesn't happen, his behavior gets noticeably worse. So I'm also cognizant that, all right, Joe, you feel like it's important for you to tell this really long, boring story, but what's probably better for the family unit is for you to go and wrestle with the young fella for 10, because then that's reset. He's more manageable. And if he's more manageable, quite often the daughter's more manageable. Therefore, the wife can cope with it all. So it's like how one little piece can be such a critical piece that it causes everything to unravel. I think it's just trying to be self-aware and look at the situation and go, I really want to tell you this story. I really want to talk about this stuff, but you know what? There's other shit going on.
Do you and your wife have open discussions about what you need? Are you able to say to her, at some point, I need to tell you a long story, right? When would be a good time for you, for me to tell that story? Like, how open are you? Do you do it in your mind and try and gauge it, or do you actually chat about it?
Sometimes it's time dependent, right? If I get home and it's all chaos and the kids have just gotten home and she's had a terrible day at school or whatever, that's not the time to plan anything at all. But I might say, if I can see that she's not coping or she's gone within, then I'll be like, can we talk later? and that's all it might be, just a couple of words, and she'll just go, yeah, cool. And then I think it's then up to me to read the room and get the environment. If she might be cooking dinner and I might be making kids lunches at the same time, we're in the same area, and that's maybe when's the right time to talk. But yeah, so do we structure time around conversations? Not always, but do we have short conversations, just forward plan for family time? Then yes,
Yes.
we try our best of an evening, if there's not gymnastics or sport or something on, to play like a card game. Side note, the Cards Against Humanity version that's for kids, absolutely brilliant. My
Really?
kids have absolutely, they love it. Bear in mind, my kids are 10 and 12, so it's about all bums and poos and farts and stuff. But it's not the full-blown Cards Against Humanity, and we play that almost every night. It's so
Really?
much fun. And everything that we read and everything that I read and everything that I listen to says it's just about connection, because I've got a 12-year-old that's preteening hard, and she, more than anything, just needs connection with her friends, with other girls, and with me, because I can already see that the relationship between 12-year-old girl and mum is going to be a trying one in the teenage years. I've got to be that guy. And so, yeah, quite often we find a silly card game. And there's another card game that I really love, and I can't think of the name of it, but it gives you four options, and you get to tell a story about yourself. You get to do something you reflect on. I think it's called Get to Know You, and they've got four different cards that you can pick up, and I find it's really wholesome. It's really wholesome, and it allows us as a family unit to connect whenever we find time. Like after dinner is normally a good time when we're trying to keep them in the house and we're trying not to get them dirty again after they've just cleaned up. We'll sit at the kitchen table and play a card game, and I really enjoy that. It's important. Our kids, I think back to the years that I did miss when I was in the military, they don't remember that. But if I'm absent now, they will remember that. So now I'm going to try really hard to connect and be safe, because at the end of the day, they're going to face some huge challenges through their teenage years. No matter what, we've just got to suck it up and be there for them.
Yeah, and you just want to
Don't
be
even get
the
me started.
call. I reckon the most devastating thing for me, this is a hard thing this is would be is if one of my children made a mistake like late at night as a teenager and didn't call me. I would feel that to my core. That's pretty much all I feel like I'm building at the moment is enough of a deep relationship where they know they can call me. And that for me would be success. If I got a late, I suppose the real success would be if you didn't get the late night call because they weren't out doing something that it shouldn't be
But they're
doing.
but they're going to come.
I'm telling you, I'm going to get lots of them, hopefully. But I would be devastated if there was stuff going on and I was unaware because they were too scared to tell me for fear of my reaction. That would be devastating, I think.
Yeah, I think it's also just about being open and going, look, these kids, my kids are 10 and 12, they're seeing it all already. The other day, my 10-year-old's, hey, Dad, what's porn? I was like, oh,
Oh,
jeez,
that's a big question.
big one.
But then you
But
have to answer because he's going to Google. You don't want him to Google that word.
he's probably already Googled it. Like these things happen with these kids. But yes, I just look, we sat and we talked about it, and we just messaging with all of that kind of stuff is always about consent, care, and being safe. That's our kind of consistent messaging
Mm.
with all those really tricky subjects. But I thought, oh, 10 and 12, they're not yet. But no, it's here for us. And I'm not sure how that ties into all of this separate ADHD discussion, but it's just, again, I think it's about being observant and reading the room. And if
Mm.
something's not the time to talk about it, bite your tongue and do it later. Unfortunately, I'm at the bottom of the pecking order.
Yeah, you're behind the dog, which that's not true, but it might be true. What message do you have to share for husbands or partners of women with ADHD?
I guess the message is empathy, patience, and just learn. Just learn. Get out of your own head. And it's really challenging because some things you could be perceived as lazy. Oh, you're lazy. You didn't pick up this, or you didn't close that door or turn that light off. Like around my house, there's a trail of destruction constantly. But it's not that she's lazy, and it's not that she doesn't know how to do this. It's just that other stuff happens and her brain moves in other directions. And my brain is not the same as her brain. And I think acknowledging that people have different brains is a really important thing. And I think that takes a lot of humility. So if you do start to see the signs, do some research, do some self-learning, grow a little, and be open. And at the end of the day, if your spouse, if you're still in that relationship, then you're gonna have to pick your game up and change the way you think and change the way you do things. And that could be hard, really hard, because it's too easy to default to, "Oh, he's bloody lazy," or why don't you do this, or sit your ass down and do your teacher's registration. Like it's too easy to think that, but you have to think differently. Part of why I reached out is because I'm reasonably self-aware and emotionally intelligent, but I realize that's not a trait that every male or spouse may have. And so, is there a focus group or is there a team of people there's not a lot of resources. Like there isn't a lot out there for people like me in this scenario. That's what prompted me to reach out was maybe there's something, and it was trying to find that balance of I never wanted to make it about me. It was about the care that I met and the lessons learned where I was a dick husband that maybe some other husband doesn't have to make those mistakes. And that for me was why I wanted to chat to you. Because if I can help any other spouse, husband, whatever, be more accepting and learning about ADHD and what it is, because it's a real thing. We know this, but a lot of people don't understand that. And I like helping people and I like hanging out with people in similar situations. I've got a fairly small friend group, but we're tight. And I'm looking to do better.
Yeah, clearly. And I think as well, it's important to acknowledge that it is harder. So if you're a parent of a child that's neurospicy, it's going to be harder. Let's acknowledge that. If you have a partner, other people in your family that you're sharing tasks with that have ADHD, it's going to be harder. And I think acknowledging that it's going to be harder and that it's going to be frustrating is important because we don't want to pretend it's all about the mum or the dad that has ADHD. You've actually got the supports around that who are working overtime to scaffold support and sometimes build up the other person who has got, I call it a cottage cheese brain, where I am, like my husband says to me, I'm the dumbest genius he's ever known. He's like, you're phenomenal a quarter of the time, and the other three quarters, horrible, like horrible. When you've got someone who's a bit cottage cheesy, and so they can do one thing great, but that's completely irrelevant to life, right? They've got a superpower that's not relevant or helpful in any sense of the word, but yet putting away the washing is like momentous task for them. That's going to require more work from the partner.
And also, it's important to think that you do get jealous of people with these kids that are just beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
What did you do? Like, why are my kids not like that? My 10-year-old, this is probably an overshare, but he's only just stopped wetting the bed.
Mm,
He's 10. I'm like, why is it that he did that? And it's hard to not put that on yourself, but you just have to realize that kids in general are really hard. And if you add a layer of spiciness to it, it's even harder. And that's just the hand that you were dealt. And if you can get the support through your GP and or any other support mechanism, then take it. Like there's no point being proud and just saying, yeah, I love the story you told about your mother's group. And my wife never went to mother's group. She hated it. She didn't like people. And she was just like, I don't want to pretend like it's all fun because it's not. My kids suck. When they were little, didn't sleep a wink. My now 12-year-old, she was a terrible sleeper as a baby. And my 10-year-old, he's always been a shocking sleeper. Now, I reckon he wakes up 50% of the nights of every
mm,
week, like still. And it's just like, oh, damn, when does this get easier? And I think it
mm.
never gets easier. The challenges just change.
Yeah, a psychologist, I've known him for years. He said to me the other day, he goes, you've just got to remember that when everyone else is having a break, so for example, let's say on a weekend you go out to the park or you go do something and then you come back. And then I'm just talking generally, let's say neurotypical children might then have a break. So they might have lunch, they might sit down and watch a movie, or they might like potter around and do their own thing, or however, maybe they unpack their own bags. I have no idea what they do. Mine don't switch off. So they go back out to the trampoline and have a huge fist fight, or they'll do something else that requires supervision. So he was saying to me that it's okay to acknowledge that there's not a lot of breaks actually. So if we look at a Saturday and there's 12, 14 hours that maybe you're on or whatever it is that you're on, I feel like I'm on 16 to 18, but anyway, you're on the whole time, not entertaining necessarily, like keeping alive, making sure that they're safe. I'm still in that. And I think acknowledging that it is harder and similar for you, and I would be hard work for my husband. I 100% know that. We actually laugh about it because I don't know when I'm getting my carer's payment. Don't people get that? Because we both have to do a lot of scaffolding for each other. And it's sometimes emotionally regulating is hard too. So I think acknowledging that life in a neurospicy family, if you do have members, especially with you being neurotypical, possibly, we don't know this, do we, Joe? You also talked about a lot of neurodiverse people in this, and I'm like, who's attracting those, Joe? Are you really the only neurotypical person in this group of friends? Don't know. Jury's out for me.
Don't know, but for me, I guess the reason that we have a lot of her friends here is because I grew up in WA. And
Wow.
so when I was in the military, I was always in Perth. So all of my military friends, all my family, all my extended kind of friend network, I went to school over there. I don't have a lot of just my friends in Melbourne. And so we
Mm,
tend to default to all the local school teachers because she teaches 6 kilometers away. So we tend to have
ah,
brought in a lot of her friends, and a lot of those friends are school teachers who are probably neurospicy
yeah.
themselves. I can't claim that I'm totally neurotypical, but I think a lot of the surrounding group comes from her friend network. So
Yes. Okay. Okay. No, that's cool. Look, Joe, I've got to thank you so much for your time. This was so interesting. I was very curious about you from all the emails and the messages because I was like, who is this active husband that wants to get his teeth into his wife's diagnosis and understand support better, particularly when she may or may not be sitting in the imposter syndrome, which is just part of the
100%.
diagnosis. She's still in that. A lot of women go in, jump into all the information and they tell everybody, and it's see that, see this, it's all ADHD, see that, see this. And it becomes like really overwhelming for the husband. He's, yeah, but you just went and got a glass. That's not ADHD. That's just people getting glasses. So good on you for being so proactive when she's still in her own journey.
And the medication journey, we'll keep trying, we'll do things. But look, she has said that at times that clarity has come and it's been really nice. And so we're on the right track. But this is, I think it's a journey, and we unfortunately haven't landed on the right dosage or medication straight away. But you know what? I think this all ties into the broader picture of me trying to be a good husband and father and set my kids up for success because that's what really matters. Getting them through and being good people that are supported and know what to do when things go wrong. That's what I'm motivated to do. And I think that if there's other people out there who see themselves in a scenario like mine, if I can value add anything to their journey, then I'm up for that. I don't know. I did start a Facebook group, but I'm really bad at social media, so I haven't
Mm,
really gotten on board with that yet. But I was trying also to do it in a way which was respectful of her wishes because she's no, don't go telling anyone. And so it's
mm,
been okay. My natural sort of reaction was, oh, there's got to be other guys that are my age that might have neurospicy wives, and maybe we can all go and have a beer and laugh about all the funny shit that goes on. And but at
mm,
least then understand why. One thing I'm really big on is learning from mistakes. If people can learn
mm.
from my mistakes or things that I've done, then great. It just means that their partner, spouse, wife, whatever is going to have a better journey. It's good. And when I first came across your podcast, that was part of my learning journey was just listening to all the stories of the mums that you'd had on. And your listener audience, I assume, is much the same. And I don't know, but I would assume that most of your listeners are mums or females themselves. So I straight away knew that I was going to be one of the minorities listening to your podcast. But there's got to be others. There's got to be other neurotypical spouses that may listen or may not. But how do we reach them and talk to them? And how do we connect? Because that's how we provide better houses to live in, better homes, and better relationships.
Oh, absolutely. And I so respect that. Joe, I'll just ask you a quick question. So hold your thought if you can. One thing we didn't touch on was self-care. No one wants to talk about self-care. However, we were talking about how it is much more difficult and there is a lot more going on for somebody who is the spouse of a neurospicy person. How important do you think mental health and self-care is?
You have to look after yourself because if you're going to make these quite drastic changes to your, maybe not your personality, but your value system and your beliefs and the way you function in the relationship, something's got to give. And so if you're now going to change the way you think, oh, this person's lazy because they left this trail of destruction through the house, if you're going to change the way that you think about that, oh no, let's be empathetic. That takes energy. And I think when you take energy, you've got to put some back somewhere. And I have a regular therapist that I speak to, and quite often the wife and this neurospiciness is brought up in conversation. And it's really important to look after yourself because it's hard to be empathetic without taking on some of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And the cup analogy is always overdone, but if you do have a full cup and that's how you wake up in the morning, then it doesn't take much to tip you over the edge. And we all need to do our best as parents and partners to empty our cup and attempt to have more space for those around us. I think that's a really good point.
Yeah. And again, I'll never claim to be anything other than I'm not. What you need to do is if you're going to go into this scenario where things have changed, someone's neurospicy and you've got to help them with that journey, you've then essentially got to find more bandwidth somewhere. And we're all time poor. We are. And it's to find bandwidth means that you've got to give something, which means that you've got to put energy back. And I find that eating, less drinking, therapy, exercise, and connection, they're all really good things.
Yeah, there are always those things that like people know about, but they don't necessarily do.
Correct. It's too easy to talk about it and you just don't do it. And it is important.
Absolutely. But then you as the partner would then receive a better version of your partner. real winner is everyone. Yeah.
See, the real winner is the family unit, because then you've got the bandwidth to give to your wife, which means that you can then focus on other things, and acceptance is key. Definitely self-care, huge. You can't go into this learning journey without it.
Thank you so much for your time, Joe. I really appreciate it. This was really insightful, and I'm hoping that women that are listening to this episode go ahead and forward it to their partners, because I think it's been a really interesting perspective. Thank you so much. The key message here is you are not alone. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, follow us on Instagram or head over and join our amazing ADHD Mums Podcast Facebook community. Everything you do matters and helps to spread the word about what neurodiversity in females looks like.